Most agents treat open houses like a lottery. Just set up, smile, and hope that somebody is going to be asking them to be their agent. Well, I don't love that strategy because it relies too much on hope. And in this business, you can't rely on hope because it doesn't work out very well. So what I want to talk about today is I want to give you guys 3 specific hooks that you're going to be using when you're at an open house to get buyers to be interested in talking to you and to get them to be interested in continuing a relationship with you. I'm going to break down in general what the psychology of buyers is when they're coming to an open house. And I'm also going to talk about what you're going to be doing at the very end in order to close. The goal of all of this is you have to take leads and you have to convert them into clients. If we're not doing that, then the open house is just not a good use of time. The nice thing about open houses, though, is that they do work. And I get this question all the time. Slap, do open houses work? Does this work? Does that work? The reality is pretty much everything works if you have the right technique and if you're willing to put in the time and the effort. All right, so let's dive into open houses. And the very first thing you want to talk about when it comes to open houses is going to be some of the psychology behind buyers and what's going through their heads. Most open house visitors are not going to be purchasing the property that they're visiting there. And the reason that for that is that they just simply aren't that serious yet. And a lot of people who are visiting open houses are usually a little bit earlier in their search. They may not have narrowed down yet. They may not have an agent, which is actually really good for you. It's good for everybody that's doing an open house. And that's exactly why they do them. But the point is that these are buyers who aren't super serious yet, and they probably need to see more homes. A lot of the time when somebody comes to an open house, it's on a whim. They're like, hey, you know what? It's a Saturday. We got a little bit of time. We're kind of thinking about making a move. Let's just go see. Let's see what's out there. Maybe it'll be interesting. The second important thing to understand is that most visitors who are coming to open houses are not there in order to engage a realtor. So they do not want to engage with realtors. And this is going to show up in a few different ways. They're going to come in, they're going to look around, they're going to say, okay, cool, see you later. They're not going to be stopping and saying, hey, Mr. Realtor, you have your license, don't you? Well, why don't we buy a house with you? In most cases, that's not how it's going to go. Because the reason that these people are at an open house is most likely because they don't have a realtor and maybe they don't want to engage a realtor yet because they feel they're just not ready or some other reason. Sometimes people have had bad experiences. Sometimes people shop around at open houses because they want to go directly through a listing agent. They prefer not to work with a buyer's agent. You're going to be running into these. And you can also convert these. I've converted many of these types of buyers. They're going to take more work. It takes a lot more convincing because maybe they had a bad experience, but these can be very viable opportunities for you to secure a client. Now, the third piece of psychology that's very important to understand, and I think this might be the most important, is that 99.9% of people who come to an open house are not going to be calling you after you give them a business card. In fact, I don't like business cards. This is an example of what a lot of agents do. They'll take their business card at the end when somebody's about to exit the property and they'll say, here you go. If you have any questions, let me know. There's not going to be any questions after that. There's going to be no communication in most cases after that because you have to be the one in the driver's seat. If you're not in the driver's seat and you don't have their contact information, that's basically a dead lead because they're not going to be working with you. It's just, I've done this from experience. I've done this many times. I've done a lot of open houses and I've seen what it's like to give out business cards and then not get those phone calls. All right, the final piece of psychology here is that most buyers want to get in, they want to see the home, and they want to get out. They're not there to talk to you. They are there to just see the property and then be on their way. And the way that this presents itself is sometimes you'll see people that are almost like sneaking away because they know as an agent you want to talk to them. So they're like waiting for the right opportunity. When you're busy with something else, they'll quickly go put their shoes on and then they'll escape. I know it sounds a little bit silly, but I've seen people do this just because they don't like salespeople. A lot of people don't like salespeople. They don't want to be sold to. And so in order for us as successful agents who are going to be converting these leads, we need to have hooks. We need to get people interested in having a conversation with us. We need to get them interested in giving their contact information to us. Now, before we get into the hooks, I want to talk about what it means to actually run an open house. So let's take a look right here. Okay, these are just a few quick tips. I don't like to follow people around the open house. So don't be like their shadow where you're going through the entire house with them. Instead, the strategy that I like to use is I'll kind of be walking around throughout the home and I'll bump into people. And when I do, I'm going to try to open up those conversations. Now, opening up a conversation really just comes down to asking meaningful questions. And these are some examples. So, for example, what about this house caught your eye? That's a good one to ask because specifically you want to know, like, was there a reason that they're out here? Did Maybe they like the number of bedrooms, maybe they like the area, maybe it was something else. If you can find out little details like that, it gives you cues as to how you can dive deeper into a conversation. The other thing that you can ask is, do you live in the area? Somebody who is a local versus somebody who's coming from farther away is going to be very different, because as an agent, you have to be able to communicate from a place of authority. If somebody happens to know the area better than you do, you're not going to have authority if you're trying to convince them that you are going to be more knowledgeable than them. So you have to come at it from a different angle. We'll talk about the different hooks in a second here. Okay, and the last question is there anything this home is missing? I like to ask this because it really gives me a good glimpse into what they like and what they don't like. And very quickly, you're going to find out what is very important to them. So something that you're going to hear a lot is, well, it's a little bit too small, or the price is too high, or whatever it is. That's a very important cue for you for how to continue that conversation. All right, so now that we've got this out of the way, let's talk about the very first hook. And the first one is giving buyers more options, okay? You want to be the source of listings. So what I like to do is I like to have 3 different options. So we're gonna have 1, 2, and 3. When I'm preparing for an open house, I'm gonna be finding a few different active similar homes in the area. Maybe they're around the corner, maybe they're a 2-minute drive away, whatever I think the best options are going to be. I wanna have these prepared. Now I'm gonna print these off. So I'm gonna have a copy of each one of these, probably multiple copies. And then if somebody tells me that, yeah, you know what, we like it, it's just a little bit too expensive, I'm going to have an option. And that option is going to be something that's smaller and lower in price. So I can then present it to them and say, hey guys, you know what? There's actually one around the corner, very similar to this. It's a little bit smaller, but I think you're gonna like the budget a lot more. Now I have something to talk about. And ideally what I'm trying to do with this hook is get them to be interested in another property. And obviously that property most likely isn't gonna have an open house. So what I'm gonna say is, guys, unfortunately this one does not currently have an open house, but what I can do is I can set up a private tour just if you guys wanna compare and see what's out there. I like to take away the pressure because I don't want them to feel like I'm showing that home to them to sell it to them. They might not be comfortable with that yet. But if it's just a matter of, hey, you guys can take a look at it, you can compare, you can get a much better feel, they're a lot more likely to agree. And if I can get them with this hook, then we are going to be very quickly setting up 1, 2, or 3 additional showings, either that same day or possibly over the next few days. The other options here are something that's bigger and with a higher price. So sometimes people say, yeah, you know, we like it, but it's just not big enough. Okay, cool. Are you okay to go up in price? And then the third option that I want to have available is just something with a completely different layout. Let's say that I'm doing an open house in a bungalow. Well, I'm going to have a 2-story ready to go for a very similar price because maybe they prefer a different layout. So having these options is going to give you the ability to very quickly set up private tours. And once you set up those private tours, showing value and becoming their agent becomes so much easier. Now, one quick bonus tip for anybody who's a real pro, anybody who wants to take this to the next level, is have off-market properties. I love off-market properties because it's a unique sales proposition. It's a USP. No other agent has this. They haven't seen it anywhere else. You might be the only person that's talking about off-market properties, also known as pocket listings. So if you can offer them something that nobody else can and they haven't seen anywhere, that's very valuable, and the chances of them saying, yes, we'd like to see it, is going to be very high. Plus, there's an added element of exclusivity. Nobody else can see this home because it's not on the market. So that piques people's interest and they're much more likely to be receptive. All right, let's move on to hook number 2. This is where you are going to be the neighborhood expert. Now, in order to be a neighborhood expert, you are going to need to do a good amount of research ahead of time. And before I do any open house, I want to make sure that I really know the area. I know the nearby sales. I know what's happening in the community from a development standpoint, so that essentially anybody who's talking to me will feel like I have insider level information and that they're missing out by not working with me. So number 1 is nearby sales. We can talk about nearby sales. We can say, guys, so just to give you an idea, down the street, a very similar property to this one, same square footage, same, all the features, everything else, it's sold for this price. This is how it compares to this one right here. And just having that level of information is going to make people feel a lot more confident in making a decision. And if they feel that you know everything about the area, you know the price points, you're going to be the person to help them out. Okay, market changes. This isn't just specific necessarily to that neighborhood. It can be specific on the macro scale, what's happening in the market overall. So if you can really master what's going on in the market, are prices going down, are prices going up, and you can advise accordingly and give people a bit of an edge on making the right decision, they're going to feel like you are the person that they should be working with. And the final point here is talk about common buyer pitfalls. For any type of community, there's usually going to be certain downsides to living in that area. So let's say that somebody's looking for a 1960s bungalow. Okay, a 1960s home is not new. We know that it's very likely to need new windows, new roof if they haven't been replaced already. It's probably going to have asbestos somewhere in the home. Depending on where you live in North America, the home might have a furnace or it might have 2 air conditioners. So the point is, if you can talk about some of the common pitfalls, for example, Mr. Buyer, one of the common mistakes I see people make in this neighborhood is there's a lot of renovated homes, but a lot of those renovated homes are cheap flips. And if you're buying a flip, you're not always getting the best quality. In fact, they might have left everything under the hood untouched. So you might have to come in, you might have to replace the electrical, you may have to do the windows, the roof. I just want to make sure that you guys can move into a home where you can be confident that you're not going to be spending tens of thousands of dollars over the next 1 to 10 years. And here's how I'm going to help you do that. So if you can do that, if you can explain common pitfalls and provide a solution, you're now giving that person every reason they need in order to work with you specifically. All right, hook number 3. This is going to be the last one I'm going to be talking about today. The one thing I also want to add is that you don't have to just stick to these ones. There's a million different ways that you can hook buyers in, but I want to give you ones that are the easiest, that are the lowest hanging fruit. And the third one is it's not always going to work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And if you're really good at this, then you know that it works. If you're not good at it, then it might not be a great option. So this is going to be the personal connection. This is where you're building very high rapport with people. So you're not relying necessarily on just your expertise, just your knowledge of the community. You are trying to build a genuine connection with this person. If you can do that on a very quick basis with a lot of people, you're going to succeed in real estate. Okay, so what are the keys here? Well, you're going to need to build a lot of rapport with this person. Find out what their hobbies are. Find out where they live. If there's similarities that you have, if you guys both live in the same community, if you both have the same hobbies, whatever you can find throughout the course of that conversation, double down on it, build that rapport, build that personal trust, and there's a much higher chance this person is going to want to work with you. That's that social connection and those mutual interests that are all going to be working together. If you can do all 3 of these hooks, you are going to be doing very, very well. But if you can just get at least one, that is going to give you a leg up. And you also always have to think, who is the person I'm talking to and what kind of personality do they have? If it's an engineer who's very introverted, well, hook number 3 is probably not going to work because they don't really want to socialize with you. You're going to get them with either 1 or 2. But if it's somebody who's very outgoing, somebody who isn't interested in the details, then you're going to have to get very high rapport with that person to get them interested in talking to you further. Now, I want to talk about closing leads. Here's the bottom line. You absolutely have to get contact information. If you do not get contact information, that is not a lead. Nothing is going to happen with that lead in 99.9% of the cases because most people will not call you on your business card. I know I said this before, but I really want to make sure everybody understands this. The goal is to get contact. You need to get emails, you need to get phone numbers, and whatever else you can. Okay, but number 1, of course, is always phone numbers. If you can get a phone number, you can follow up and then you can really start building that relationship. Immediate value follow-up. This is super critical. And the key piece here is it has to be valuable. So let's say that somebody walks through the open house and maybe asks you a few questions. You can follow up with an email or a call, whichever you prefer, maybe even a text. And you can say, hey, I know you were curious about this. Here's additional information on what you wanted to know about. That is value. And if you can give them something that's immediately valuable to them, you're going to be very memorable and they're much more likely to continue the connection. Now, the other reality here is that most of these are going to be long-term follow-up leads. A lot of the time, if somebody's looking at an open house, they may not be immediately ready to purchase. You're going to need to follow up with these people. So what does that mean? You're putting them into the CRM. Maybe you're going to get a drip going, but you're doing long-term follow-ups, but they have to be appropriate. You can't just keep calling somebody and saying, hey, do you want to buy a house? Do you want to buy a house? People are going to get sick of it. They're not going to pick up the phone. So have a solid plan of you delivering value over the next 3 to 12 months, however long it takes to get this lead to come around and to get them to commit to working with you. Okay, so that is a quick guide on how you can turn a lot more just lookers into actual leads and then into clients. Open houses are half science, half art because you need to know how to talk to people, but you also have to come extremely well prepared. And the more prepared you are, the better your scripting is, the better you are talking to people, the higher the chance you have of closing these leads. So follow these hooks and hopefully it's going to help you build your business.